No place to land a mother's resilience amid family betrayal and sci-fi spark of hope. Mara stood in the driveway of her grandparents' old Victorian house in upstate New York, her 8-month-old daughter, Lila, nestled against her chest in a carrier. The summer air was heavy, the cicadas hum a relentless backdrop to the chaos unfolding before her. A U-Haul truck sat parked at the curb, its back open like a gaping mouth, swallowing her belongings, diaper bags, clothes, Lila's crib, piece by piece. Her grandfather, Henry, directed the effort with a grim set to his jaw, while her grandmother, Ruth, stood nearby, arms crossed, her face a mask of conflicted emotions. Mara's heart pounded, not from anger but from a bone-deep confusion. How had it come to this? She was 31, a graphic designer who'd spent years working abroad, her life a patchwork of contracts and cities. Her legal documents still listed this house as her address, a tether to the place where she'd grown up, where her bedroom still held faded posters of starships and constellations. A month after Lila's birth, her marriage to Ethan had imploded, a slow unraveling of trust that culminated in a night she'd rather forget. She'd fled their shared apartment with her mother-in-law, taking Lila and what little she could carry, and returned to this house. Her grandparents, retired and splitting their time between New York and a new place in Delaware, had welcomed her, or so she'd thought. The house, empty most of the year, was supposed to be a safe haven while she sorted out her next steps. But safety, Mara was learning, was a fragile thing. It started with whispers from her uncles, Henry and Ruth's 3 sons, who'd been bickering over the house's future for years. The Victorian, with its sagging porch and stained glass windows, was a prize they all coveted, a legacy to claim once their parents passed. Mara's presence, it seemed, had lit a fuse. Her middle uncle, Paul, was the loudest, calling Henry to complain that Mara was squatting in their inheritance, that she'd brought trouble with her messy life. The other uncles, including her father, David, nodded along or stayed silent, their cowardice a familiar sting. Mara had ignored the tension, focusing on Lila, her soft coos, her tiny hands clutching a pendant Mara wore, a gift from a colleague in Berlin, its surface etched with glowing circuits that pulsed faintly at night. It was a small, sci-fi oddity, a reminder of the world beyond this house. But yesterday, everything had collapsed. Henry and Ruth drove up from Delaware unannounced, Paul in tow. While Mara chatted with Ruth in the kitchen, pouring tea and trying to keep things light, Henry and Paul had started upstairs, hauling her belongings out without a word. Mara had noticed too late. She'd heard the thump of boxes, the creak of the U-Haul's ramp, and ran upstairs to find her room half empty. Lila's crib was gone, her clothes stuffed into garbage bags. "What's going on?" she'd asked Henry, her voice shaking. Henry wouldn't meet her eyes. "Too much pressure, Mara," he said, his voice gruff. "The boys won't stop. Paul's got it in his head you're claiming the house. I just want to make my own choices about this place." Mara's stomach dropped. "I'm not claiming anything. I just needed somewhere to stay." Ruth, holding Lila in the kitchen, had chimed in, her tone sharp. "You are a grown woman, Mara. This isn't our mess to clean up." Mara had taken Lila back, her hands trembling. "You don't get to hold her after this," she said, her voice low but firm. Ruth's face twisted, and she'd unleashed a tirade, cursing Mara, blaming her for marrying Ethan, for having Lila, for ruining everything. Then, unbelievably, Ruth had pushed her, fingers jabbing at Mara's head, shoving her toward the stairs. Mara clutched Lila tightly, her heart racing as she backed away, avoiding a fall. Now, standing in the driveway, Mara watched Henry load the last box. "We'll take the U-Haul wherever you want," he said, his voice softer, almost apologetic. "I have nowhere to go," Mara said, her voice breaking. She'd cut ties with her mother's side of the family years ago, and her father, David, had brushed her off when she called, saying, "I'm not getting involved." Her savings were thin, enough to rent a storage locker for non-essentials, but not enough for a new place yet. She'd been out of work since Lila's birth, her freelance contracts on hold. Ruth approached, her expression conflicted.
"Mara, I didn't mean for it to go like this.
Let's talk inside." Mara shook her head, Lila stirring against her. "You pushed me, Grandma. You blamed me for my life falling apart. I don't trust you right now." Ruth's eyes welled up, but Mara turned away, walking to her car. She drove to a nearby diner, Lila asleep in her car seat, and sat in a booth, staring at her phone. A voicemail from Ruth waited, "Left an hour ago, Mara, I'm sorry. I talked to Henry, he shouldn't have done this. Come back to the house. We're here until tomorrow. I want to see Lila, make sure you're both okay." Mara deleted the message. The words felt hollow after Ruth's outburst, after the physical push. She needed a plan, not apologies. She searched for legal aid on her phone, her mind racing. Could she stay in the house? Did she have rights as a tenant, since her documents listed it as her address? She wasn't sure, but the thought of returning, even for a few days, made her skin crawl. Yet with Lila to care for, she had to be practical. That night, Mara checked into a budget motel, using her dwindling funds. Lila slept in a portable crib, her pendant glowing faintly on the nightstand. Mara researched, learning that New York law might give her tenant rights if she could prove residency, but it would take time, court filings, evidence, maybe a lawyer she couldn't afford. She called a legal aid hotline, leaving a message for a callback. Exhausted, she sketched in her notebook, a starship landing on a new planet, its hull scarred but intact, a reflection of her own battered hope. The next morning, Mara drove back to the house, not to stay but to confront her grandparents. Henry was in the yard, pruning roses, his movements slow. Ruth sat on the porch, her face drawn. Mara parked, holding Lila close, and approached. "I need to know why," Mara said, her voice steady. "Why you thought kicking us out was the answer." Henry sighed, setting down his shears. "All's been relentless. Said you were taking advantage, that we'd lose control of the house. I panicked, Mara. I'm old, and I just wanted the noise to stop." Ruth stood, her hands twisting together. "I was wrong to push you. I was angry, Paul got in my head, too. But I love Lila. I love you. Stay, just until you figure things out." Mara studied them, seeing their regret but also their frailty. They were caught in their son's feud, just as she was caught in her own storm. "I can't stay," she said. "Not after yesterday. But I need a few days to find a place. Can you promise me that much?" Henry nodded. "The house is yours for the week. We'll keep Paul away." Mara agreed, wary but desperate. She moved back in, keeping to her room, her belongings unpacked but ready to go. She contacted a friend in the city, Sophie, who offered a couch for a few weeks. Mara also reached out to a local women's shelter, which connected her with a caseworker to explore housing options. The legal aid callback confirmed she might have tenant rights but advised against fighting for the house. It would be a long battle, and she needed stability now. Over the week, Mara and Ruth had cautious conversations. Ruth shared stories of her own struggles as a young mother, revealing a vulnerability Mara hadn't seen before. Henry stayed quiet but made Lila laugh with silly faces, a small olive branch. Mara's father, David, called, his voice hesitant. "I should have stepped in," he said. "I'm sorry." Mara accepted the apology but kept her distance, her trust thin. By the week's end, Mara had a plan. She'd move to Sophie's, take on freelance work, and apply for subsidized housing. The house, with its memories and conflicts, wasn't home anymore. As she packed the last of her things, she left a sketch on the kitchen table, a starship soaring toward a new horizon, Lila's pendant glowing at its center. A note read, "For you. I'll be okay." Driving away, Lila babbling in the back, Mara felt a fragile strength. The betrayal had cut deep, but she was charting her own course now, one step at a time. Mara woke to the soft coos of her daughter, Lila, in the portable crib beside her. The familiar creak of her grandparents' Victorian house in upstate New York surrounded them, a sound that once meant home but now felt like a borrowed space. It was her third day back, a temporary stay granted after her grandparents, Henry and Ruth, had apologized for the abrupt eviction orchestrated by her Uncle Paul's pressure. Mara's belongings, hastily returned from the U-Haul, were stacked in her old bedroom, but she kept them packed, ready to leave at a moment's notice. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. The morning sun filtered through the stained glass window, casting kaleidoscope patterns on the hardwood floor. Lila clutched the pendant Mara wore, a futuristic trinket from her time abroad, its etched circuits glowing faintly, a small comfort in the chaos. Mara's savings were dwindling, her freelance graphic design work on hold since Lila's birth 8 months ago. She needed a plan, and fast. The legal aid hotline had confirmed she might have tenant rights, but pursuing them meant a court battle she wasn't ready for, not with Lila to protect. Her friend Sophie's offer of a couch in the city was a lifeline, but it wasn't a home. Downstairs, the kitchen was quiet. Henry was out pruning the roses again, his way of avoiding hard conversations. Ruth sat at the table, sipping tea, her face softer than the day she'd pushed Mara toward the stairs. Mara hesitated, Lila on her hip, before joining her. "Morning," she said, her voice cautious but not cold. "Morning, Mara," Ruth replied, her eyes lingering on Lila. She's getting so big. Mara nodded, adjusting Lila's carrier. She is. Thanks for letting us stay a bit longer. Ruth's lips tightened, a flicker of guilt crossing her face. I meant what I said. I'm sorry about everything. All got us all worked up. I shouldn't have taken it out on you. Mara wanted to believe her, but the memory of Ruth's finger jabbing her head, her harsh words blaming Mara's marriage, lingered like a bruise. I appreciate that, Mara said, choosing her words carefully. But I need to know this won't happen again. Lila and I need stability, even if it's just for a few days. Ruth nodded, her hands wrapping around her mug. You have a week, like Henry said. Paul's been told to back off. I'll make sure of it. Mara exhaled, a small relief. She spent the morning on her laptop, emailing her caseworker at the women's shelter, who sent listings for subsidized housing programs in the city. She also reached out to a former colleague, Mia, who offered a short-term freelance project, designing a logo for a startup. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Mara sketched ideas in her notebook, the pendant glowing beside her, its sci-fi design inspiring a sleek, futuristic logo. Lila babbled, reaching for the pencil, and Mara smiled, letting her daughter scribble a messy star. That afternoon, Mara took Lila for a walk in the neighborhood, the old streets a mix of nostalgia and unease. She passed the diner where she'd sat after the eviction, her mind racing with nowhere to go. Now, she felt a flicker of hope, but it was tempered by the reality of her situation. Her father, David, hadn't called since his half-hearted apology, and her uncle's feud over the house loomed like a storm cloud. She wondered if the house itself, a relic of her childhood, with its starship posters and creaky floors, was cursed by their greed. Back at the house, Henry was in the living room, reading a newspaper. Mara sat across from him, Lila asleep in her arms. Grandpa, she said, her voice low, I need to understand why you let Paul push you into this. I grew up here. This was my home. Henry folded the paper, his eyes tired. I'm old, Mara. The boys, Paul especially, keep fighting over this place. They think I'm losing my grip, that you being here complicates things. I thought moving your stuff would quiet them down. I was wrong. Mara's chest tightened. You could have talked to me first. I felt betrayed. Henry nodded, his hands fidgeting. I know. I'm not good at this, standing up to them. But I want you and Lila safe. What do you need? A few more days, Mara said. And for you to keep your word about Paul. He agreed, his voice firm. Done. That evening, Ruth joined Mara in her room, helping fold Lila's clothes. The silence was awkward at first, but Ruth broke it, her voice soft. When I was your age, I had to leave my first husband. It was hard, Mara. I know what it's like to start over. Mara looked up, surprised. Ruth rarely spoke of her past. Why didn't you tell me before? Ruth shrugged, folding a onesie. Didn't think you needed my old stories. But I see you now, with Lila, and I wish I'd been braver for you. Mara's eyes stung, but she held Ruth's gaze. I just need to know you're on my side. I am, Ruth said, squeezing her hand. I was wrong to push you. Let me make it right. Over the next few days, Mara worked on the logo project, her laptop a lifeline to her old skills. She Skyped with Sophie, confirming the couch offer, and scheduled a meeting with the shelter's caseworker to visit a subsidized apartment. The house felt less like a battleground, but Mara kept her guard up, her bags packed, her pendant a reminder of her resilience. One night, Paul showed up unannounced, his voice loud in the driveway. Mara overheard him arguing with Henry, demanding to know why she was still there. Ruth stepped in, her tone sharp. This is our house, Paul. Mara stays until she's ready to go. Mara watched from the window, Lila in her arms, a quiet pride swelling. Ruth was keeping her promise. By the week's end, Mara was ready to leave. She packed the U-Haul herself this time, her movements deliberate. She left a sketch on the kitchen table, a starship hovering above a new planet, its hull glowing like her pendant, with a note, "Thank you. We'll be okay." Driving to Sophie's, Lila babbling in the back, Mara felt the weight of the house lift. It wasn't home anymore, but she was building a new one careful step at a time. Mara stood in her childhood bedroom, the walls still adorned with faded starship posters, their edges curling like memories she could no longer fully grasp. The Victorian house in upstate New York, once her anchor, now felt like a ship adrift, its creaky floors and stained glass windows unable to hold her. Her belongings were packed into boxes, Lila's crib disassembled, ready for the drive to Sophie's apartment in the city. It was her last day in the house, a week after her grandparents, Henry and Ruth, had allowed her to return following their abrupt eviction. Mara's heart was heavy but resolute. She was ready to leave, to build a new home for herself and her 8-month-old daughter. The morning was quiet, the July sun casting soft patterns through the window. Lila babbled in her portable crib, clutching the sci-fi pendant Mara wore, its etched circuits glowing faintly, a small beacon of hope. Mara's savings were nearly gone, but the freelance logo project she'd picked up was a lifeline, and the women's shelter caseworker had scheduled a viewing for a subsidized apartment next week. Sophie's couch was a temporary haven, a place to land while Mara rebuilt. She'd learned to navigate uncertainty, to carry her strength like the pendant around her neck. Downstairs, Ruth was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup, her movements slower than usual. Henry sat at the table, his newspaper untouched, his eyes following Mara as she entered with Lila on her hip. The air held a fragile truce, built on Ruth's apology and Henry's promise to keep Paul, Mara's middle uncle, at bay. But the memory of the U-Haul, Ruth's harsh words, and her physical push lingered, a wound not fully healed. "Mara," Ruth said, setting the spoon down, "you sure you're ready to go? You can stay longer." Mara shook her head, adjusting Lila's carrier. "I appreciate it, Grandma, but I need to do this. For Lila. For me." Ruth's eyes welled up, but she nodded. "I was wrong to push you, literally and figuratively. I let Paul's noise get to me. I want to be better, for you and Lila." Mara's throat tightened. She wanted to forgive, to believe Ruth's regret, but trust was a slow rebuild. "I know you're sorry," she said. "But I need space to figure things out. I'll call, though. Lila needs her great-grandma." Ruth smiled, a small, hopeful curve. Henry cleared his throat, standing. "I messed up, too, Mara. Let me help with the U-Haul. And I'm sorry about your dad. I tried talking to David, but he's stubborn." Mara's father, David, had stayed silent since his vague apology, his refusal to get involved a familiar sting. She nodded, not ready to unpack that hurt. "Thanks, Grandpa. I'll manage." They loaded the U-Haul together, Henry's hand steady despite his age, Ruth packing a bag of soup and sandwiches for the road. Mara noticed a shift in them, a quiet determination to make amends, even if imperfectly. She thought of her uncle's feud, Paul's accusations that she was squatting in their inheritance. The house, with its history and conflicts, wasn't worth fighting for anymore. Lila deserved a home free of that weight. Before leaving, Mara walked through the house one last time, her fingers brushing the Starship posters. In her room, she found a small box on the dresser, a gift from Ruth, containing a hand-knitted blanket for Lila, soft and blue like the sky. A note read, "For new beginnings. Love, Grandma." Mara's eyes stung, but she tucked the blanket into Lila's carrier, a gesture of peace she could carry forward. As she drove away, the U-Haul rumbling behind her, Mara glanced at Lila in the rearview mirror, her daughter's tiny hand gripping the pendant. Sophie's apartment was waiting, a cramped but warm refuge. The caseworker had promised more housing leads, and Mara's freelance work was picking up. She'd landed another project, a website design, enough to cover a few months' expenses. She wasn't safe yet, but she was moving toward it. At a rest stop, Mara checked her phone. A voicemail from David waited, his voice hesitant. "Mara, I should have stepped up. I'm sorry. Call me when you're settled." She didn't reply, not yet. Trust, like her new home, would take time to build. She sketched in her notebook, a starship breaking free of orbit, its hull glowing like the pendant, soaring toward a distant planet. Lila cooed, and Mara smiled. They were enough, the two of them, charting a new horizon together. Mara arrived at Sophie's that evening, the city's lights a stark contrast to the quiet of the Victorian. She unpacked only what she needed, Lila's crib set up in a corner. The pendant glowed softly on the nightstand, a reminder of resilience. Mara wasn't home yet, but she was closer, one careful step at a time. Tiny hand curled around the sci-fi pendant Mara wore, its etched circuits glowing faintly, a beacon of resilience. The Victorian house in upstate New York, with its creaky floors and family feuds, was behind them. Mara's week-long return, granted by her grandparents' regretful invitation, had been a tense necessity, a bridge to her next step, not a home. Her belongings, once tossed into a U-Haul by her grandfather Henry under pressure from her uncle Paul, were now neatly packed in the trunk, headed to Sophie's apartment in the city. The past week had been a whirlwind of action. Mara had landed another freelance design project, Her sketches of starships and glowing circuits translating into a website layout that paid enough for a month's expenses. The women's shelter caseworker had secured a viewing for a subsidized apartment, a small one-bedroom that could be theirs by August. Sophie's couch was a temporary haven, a place to regroup while Mara rebuilt. Her grandparents' apologies, Ruth's tearful regret, Henry's gruff promises to keep Paul at bay, had softened the edges of betrayal, but trust remained fractured. Mara had left a sketch on their kitchen table, a starship breaking orbit, its hull aglow, with a note, "We're okay. Thank you." At a rest stop, Mara checked her phone. A text from her father, David, waited, "I'm sorry I stayed out of it. Call me when you're settled." She didn't reply, not yet. His silence during the eviction had cut deep, but she wasn't ready to close that door. Lila stirred, cooing, and Mara smiled, brushing her daughter's cheek. The pendant glowed, its sci-fi design a reminder of her strength, a mother charting a course for two. In the city, Sophie greeted them with a hug, her cramped apartment a warm contrast to the Victorian's tension. Mara set up Lila's crib, the pendant on the nightstand casting a soft light. She sketched, a new planet, dotted with stars, a home yet to be built. The road ahead was uncertain, but Mara felt a quiet certainty. She and Lila were enough, their orbit steady, their future a horizon they'd reach together.